South Africa's power utility Eskom is experiencing energy shortages. This after the output of one of its coal-fired power stations was interrupted following an accident over the weekend. There are concerns that this will spill over into SADC countries that Eskom exports to. For more on this, we're joined, of course, by our regular analyst in Johannesburg, Clive Ramathibela-Smith. As always, a pleasure to see you, sir. Now, how important is a stable power supply for a country or an economy? I mean, it seems like an obvious question, but let's go through that.
It is quite a disturbing issue that we have in our hands here, Florence, because at the first and most important factor that we need to take into consideration is our manufacturing and our development and how that is impacted when it comes to energy consumption within the very same country that we want to make sure that it actually does produce as much as it could. But now what you're sitting with here is a problem that has been going back since 2002, in actual fact. That's when the initial signs of this blackout, excuse the pun, but that's when it started. And then over the years, it seems like we have not been able to accommodate or to work around making sure that we do have sufficient energy, sufficient power to generate enough business for us to actually go to the next level. And this is a huge and humongous problem because it means that it affects all aspects of business, not just the energy sector, but you're talking about your services, you're talking about your industrial business, and most importantly, we are talking about the consumer being affected, and that is a serious problem.
And of course, there will be serious repercussions when it comes to the latest outages in South Africa specifically. Can you take us through those repercussions?
You know, they've come out, and I don't think they had calculated their risk appropriately. They didn't understand what the depth of this particular problem would be. And now they've realized that in actual fact, it might mean that we have to actually cut down on power, but not just for business, but for even, in actual fact, for our consumers, that who are actually needing that power to make sure that they get to work, like you and I, without this lovely lights that we have in the studio, without these wonderful clothes that we have, we're not able to prepare properly. But what is sad is that it's taking us back to about 30, 40 years back when energy was a problem, or you have to iron using an iron. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Where you have to cook and you have to use proper stoves, you have to use coal as a stove, where you have to have a consumer struggling, already a consumer who's under pressure, having to now compromise and go back. And I don't think that is fair on the consumer because we're already paying all the taxes. We're already making sure that we keep up with the rates cuts or rates payments that are required. So for the fact that this has been taken away from us, it must feel like some sort of injustice because we're not getting what we are paying for, and therefore that's why you find that the situations like this create a big problem.
Do you feel that Eskom has a monopoly really when it comes to power supply? Is there a sense of sort of disrespect for the consumer in a way?
In 2006, in the UK, they introduced what they call deregulation. By deregulation, I mean that you still had basically the same power utilities and the gas utilities that you would have that would supply the same gas, you supply the same electricity and the same power to the consumers. The difference would be that on your bill, you would have something different. You would have either British Gas, or you'd have Southern Electric, or you would have the French guys who are called FEDEC. So in a nutshell, those guys actually dominated the monopoly. British Gas manipulated the monopoly until those guys came on board. But the difference is that the energy is the same, the power is the same, it doesn't change anything. So it doesn't matter what you do, even in South Africa, whether you have Eskom, whether you have Quattro Electric, or you have whoever. The point is that the substations, the suppliers of this electricity are under pressure. So it's not an issue of the company, it's an issue of the retrospective environment in which the companies find themselves under. And the pressure is continuing not because Eskom can't handle it, because Eskom did not plan pro-efficiently to make sure that those things are available even when the numbers in the country continue to grow. So that's what the problem is. It's not because of companies, not because of a monopoly. It's simply because the systems that are there are not available and they're not able to actually cater for an ordinary South African.
Now, you've spoken about the repercussions, the current repercussions and the immediate repercussions, but the worry, of course, is the ripple effect of the outages, and perhaps you can take us through that.
we can start off from the ordinary consumer. Now, if you are an ordinary consumer, you're talking about somebody that needs to leave from Soweto, from Ofimvaba, from wherever they are in those townships to get to work. Now, those people are disadvantaged. That means they have to add an extra hour to prepare for work. You know, already that is tremendously a lot of time to add on, because if they're leaving already at 4 a.m. to prepare to go to work with electricity available, that means they have to now prepare at 3 o'clock to prepare for the same work. If we now take it to the next level, we're talking about production. What are we talking about when you talk about production? We're talking about people that produce things for us to be able to consume. So we can go back and we can talk about the small companies that are in the textile industry. And I know SADC will come out now because they are the guys that represent those type of workers that produce clothing, that produce knitting, that produce cloth and all those things. Those things will now slow down because the machinery available will not be able to produce. Now, on a bigger scale, we can go back into the resources sector and we can start talking about the mining sector. We can start talking about mine production. We can start talking about the platinum, the gold, and the silver, or the precious metals that are available in that particular sector. And those will also take effect. Those will also be affected. And therefore, that means that 1.5 GDP number that we are looking for towards the end of the year might just depreciate. That's not good.
You know, Clive, very speaking, it does seem as though there is no actual immediate solution. Is there something that can be done?
No, there isn't, because the systems have not been put in place. Unfortunately, when you don't plan things efficiently in the beginning, this is the result. It's the same as any other company, any other organization that has a CEO, a CFO, and a COO that don't take responsibility on time and plan things appropriately to make sure that these things are looked after post their existence. And if you don't do that, then therefore that's what you sit with. Now there's yes, Eskom, I agree, it's a historical problem. But even though it's an historical problem, more could have been done in the last 20 years to make sure that they proactively handle the situation so that we don't get to a situation where you and I now might just have lights out.
All right, well, let's leave it on that morbid note. Thank you very much, as always, Mr. Clive Ramathibela-Smith of eNCA Investments.